but also the reasonableness of the defendant's explanation. You're not bound to accept either the inference or the defendant's explanation. The statements prove beyond a reasonable doubt each element of the offense before a defendant can be found guilty. You should consider all the evidence presented in this case and give it an impartial consideration. Part of your responsibility is to determine what the facts are based upon what you heard from the witnesses. If there are conflicts in the testimony of the different witnesses, it's your duty to reconcile them if you can. The law presumes each witness has told the truth. When you cannot reconcile the statements of the different witnesses, then you have to decide which witness or witnesses you believe and how important his or her testimony was. You do not have to accept or reject everything a witness says. You're free to believe all, none, or part of any person's testimony. In forming your opinions to which witness you believe, you may consider the following factors: how the witness looked and acted while testifying, whether the witness appeared to you to be telling the truth when he or she testified, whether the witness was in a position to know about the matter to which he or she testified. In other words, how well did the witness see or hear what they testified they saw or heard, whether the witness's statements were consistent, how believable were those statements, whether the witness had a motive to testify truthfully or a motive to testify untruthfully, whether the witness had an interest in how this case turns out. Another factor for you to consider in evaluating the witness's testimony is whether the witnesses made material statements at some point before they testified which are different from his or her testimony at trial. However, proof of any prior different statement may be considered only for the purpose of determining if the witness is telling the truth at trial. The contents of the prior inconsistent statement are not to be considered as proof at the trial. Another factor you consider in evaluating the witness's testimony is whether the witness's testimony during cross-examination appeared to be contradictory, unreasonable, and improbable. However, immaterial or minor discrepancies or differences should not affect the believability of a witness unless it should plainly appear that the witness has testified falsely. You may conclude that a witness deliberately lied about a fact that's important to your decision in the case. If so, you may reject everything that witness says. On the other hand, if you decide that a witness lied about some things but told the truth about others, you may accept the part you think is true and reject the rest. A witness may be impeached by proving that he or she has made some material statements out of court which are at variance with his or her evidence on the witness stand. However, proof of such prior inconsistent statements is considered only for the purpose of testing the witness's credibility and not as substantive proof of the matter asserted in these statements. If a witness is impeached, the jury has a right to disregard his or her evidence and treat it as untrue, except where it's corroborated by other credible testimony or by the facts and circumstances proved at the trial. You've heard testimony about the defendant's good character. You should consider this testimony along with all the other evidence in deciding if there's a reasonable doubt as to the defendant's guilt. Also, it may be considered for the purpose of enhancing his credibility as a witness. One of the issues in this case is the identification of the defendant as the person who committed the crime. The state has a burden of proving identity beyond reasonable doubt. Identification testimony is an expression of belief or impression by the witness, and its value may depend on your consideration of several things. Some of the factors which you may consider are the witness's capacity and opportunity to observe the offender. This includes, among other things, the length of time available for observation, the distance from which the witness observed, the lighting, and whether the person who committed the crime was a prior acquaintance to the witness. The degree of certainty expressed by the witness regarding identification and circumstances under which it was made. The state has a burden of proving each element of the crime charged, and that includes identification of the defendant as the person who committed the crime for which he is on trial. Crime charged in each count of the indictment is a separate and distinct offense. You must decide each charge separately on the evidence and the law that applies to that charge. The defendant may be found guilty or not guilty of any or all of the offenses charged. There will be a verdict form for each count. There's a packet of verdict forms for each count. Your finding as to each crime charge must be stated in your verdict. The verdict must represent the considered judgment of each juror. In order to return a verdict, it's necessary that each juror agree to that verdict. Your verdict must be unanimous. It is your duty as jurors to consult with one another and to deliberate with a view to reach an agreement if you can do so without violence to individual judgment. Each of you must decide the case for yourself, but do so only after an impartial consideration of the evidence with your fellow jurors. In the course of your deliberations, do not hesitate to re-examine your own view and change your opinion if convinced you in error, but do not surrender your honest conviction as to the weight or effect of the evidence solely because of the opinion of your fellow jurors or for the mere purposes of returning a verdict. You can have no prejudice or sympathy or allow anything but the law and the evidence to have any influence upon your verdict. You must render your verdict with absolute fairness and impartiality as you think justice and truth dictate. When you retire to the jury, you first select one of your members to preside over your deliberations. When you've reached a verdict, the foreman or forelady will sign the appropriate verdict form. You'll knock on the door and let the bailiff know you're ready to return your verdict. He'll let you know it's time to come back in. If you find the state has proven the defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, then you should find the defendant guilty. On the other hand, if you find the state has not proven beyond a reasonable doubt the defendant's guilt, or if you have a reasonable doubt as to his guilt, then you must find the defendant not guilty. You'll be provided with forms for all possible verdicts in the case. The jury will complete the appropriate verdict form, and your foreman or forelady will sign the appropriate verdict form. The other verdict forms will be left incomplete and unsigned. There's a packet for each count. In one count, the defendant is charged with aggravated kidnapping of Nick King. Each count has the same heading or style of the case. It reads up at the top, in the Circuit Court of Tipton County, Tennessee, State of Tennessee versus Micahel Parsons verdict form. I'd also like to mention that on the verdict form, there's a Xing out what reads, we fix a fine, a dollar mark blank, or we do not fix a fine. You'll not be asked to address a fine, and so the verdict form is just X'd out with regard to that. You've not been charged about fixing the fine, and you're not to fix a fine. If you find the state has proven the defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of aggravated kidnapping of Nick King, then you would use the verdict form that reads, we the jury find the defendant guilty of aggravated kidnapping of Nick King. Your foreperson would sign that verdict form. If you have a reasonable doubt as to the defendant's guilt of that offense, then you would proceed to consider his guilt or innocence of the lesser included offenses. If you find the defendant guilty of kidnapping, feel the state has proven his guilt of that beyond a reasonable doubt, then you would use the verdict form that reads, we the jury find the defendant guilty of kidnapping of Nick King. If you have a reasonable doubt, then you would proceed to determine his guilt or innocence of false imprisonment. If you find the state has proven him guilty of that beyond a reasonable doubt, then you would use the verdict form that reads, we the jury find the defendant guilty of false imprisonment of Nick King. The foreperson would sign that verdict form. If you have a reasonable doubt, you would proceed to determine the defendant's guilt or innocence of attempt to commit one of those prior offenses. This verdict form, if you find the defendant guilty of an attempt, then you would use the verdict form that reads, we the jury find the defendant guilty of attempt to commit blank, and you would fill in the blank, either with aggravated kidnapping, or false imprisonment. If you have a reasonable doubt as to the defendant's guilt of all of those offenses, then you have found the defendant not guilty, in which case you would use the verdict form that reads, we find the defendant not guilty. You'll fill out, that is you'll come to a unanimous verdict with regard to one of those choices, and your foreman or forelady would sign the appropriate verdict form. The second packet is identical except as to the victim, Barry Laxton. You go through the same process with regard to that packet of where the charge is aggravated kidnapping of Barry Laxton. With regard to the aggravated assault, if you find the state has proven the defendant guilty of that offense beyond a reasonable doubt, then you would use the verdict form that reads, we the jury find the defendant guilty of aggravated assault of Nick King. The foreperson would sign that verdict form. If you have a reasonable doubt, then you would proceed to determine his guilt or innocence of the lesser included offense of assault. If you find the state has proven the defendant guilty of that offense, then you would use the verdict form that reads, we the jury find the defendant guilty of assault of Nick King. If you find that the state has not proven the defendant guilty, or if you have a reasonable doubt as to the defendant's guilt, then you have found the defendant not guilty of that count, in which case you would use the verdict form, we find the defendant not guilty. Again, you'll sign, your foreman or forelady will sign one choice in each packet. They are identical verdict forms with regard to the charge of aggravated assault of Barry Laxton, except with regard to the victim's name. You go through the same process for that count. The defendant is charged in another count with burglary of a vehicle. If you find the state has proven the defendant guilty of that offense, then you would use the verdict form that reads, we the jury find the defendant guilty of burglary of a vehicle. Your foreperson will sign it. If you have a reasonable doubt as to his guilt of that offense, then you have found the defendant not guilty. There are no lesser included offenses to consider. So your foreman or forelady would, after you reach a unanimous verdict, sign one of the two forms. With regard to theft of property, again, there are two counts, one relating to property of Nick King, one relating to property of Barry Laxton. With regard to each count, remember each count is to be given separate consideration on the evidence and the law that applies to that count. If you find the state has proven the defendant guilty of theft of property of Nick King, then you would use the verdict form that reads, "We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of theft of property of Nick King." If you have a reasonable doubt, then you would use the verdict form that reads, "We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty." The same for theft of property of Barry Laxton. If you find the state has proven the defendant guilty, you would use that verdict form, and if not, then you would use the verdict form that reads "not guilty." Please don't separate the packets. Keep the packets together. You assign only one verdict form in each packet, and each count has to be given, again, separate consideration. A defendant may be found guilty or not guilty in each count.
Quick count on exhibits. Do you want to do
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. If you need to examine either the guns or the ammunition, if you'll knock on the door, let the bailiff know, and he'll pass back either the guns or the ammunition, not both at the same time. All the other exhibits will be sent back to the jury. Let me see if it's there. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the charge that I read to you is in the book. If you need to refer to it, the judgment forms in the front pocket, the paper exhibits are in the back pocket if you need to refer to them. If during the course of your deliberations a question arises, please write it down on a sheet of paper, knock on the door, and hand the paper out. I'll read your question, and I'll either write you an answer back or call you back into the courtroom to discuss it with you. However, please remember, I'm not allowed to comment on the evidence in any way. That is, I couldn't answer any fact questions. I could only help you with any logistical question you may have or any legal question about the law. You'll discuss the case only when the 12 of you are together. After you've elected a foreman or forelady, you run your own show. You take breaks when you want to take breaks. If it looks like you're going to be deliberating a while, if you'll knock on the door and send a note out to the bailiff that you'd like sandwiches or whatever you'd like to do, or you want some supper arrangements made for you, then you'll let me know and we'll see what can be done. Again, you run your own show. If you can conclude the case this evening without going late into the night, then you just let me know how you're running, and if you need to come back tomorrow, then you also let me know how you're running. You'll hand this to a member of the jury, please. That is, cease deliberations if you take any breaks. For several days, I've been telling you not to discuss the case among yourselves. Now's the time to go discuss the case among yourselves. You can retire to decide the case. any objection to the charge or correction I need to make pursuant to the Tennessee Rule of Criminal Procedure 30B, state no opinion.
Oh, sir.
And no opinion.
So what was the statute?
About the charge, is there any correction or objection to the charge you'd like to know?
Yes, sir.
Stand in recess and wait the verdict. You've been charged in docket number 6207 with theft over $1,000 and 2 counts. Do you have an attorney to represent you? All right, was that by hire or was he appointed? By hire. You going to need to hire an attorney?
Should we go ahead?
They're ready to do the CD.
You ready for that?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, ask him to come in.
I don't know what the CD is.
It's right there.
Received word from the bailiff that you were interested in something to eat. I think he's making that arrangement. And that also you wanted to hear something about with regard to the CD. Who's your spokesperson right now? What CD, what part is it you need to hear?
The part at the hangar,
Right.
the incident itself.
Okay, all right. I'll ask him to cue that up. You also sent a note out with regard to sentencing. The function of a jury is to determine what the facts are and make a determination of guilt or not guilt. If any defendant found guilty, there will be a separate sentencing hearing, at which time sentence is imposed within ranges of punishment. While I can't give you those ranges of punishment, and again, it would depend upon what crime has been charged, I can tell you that while there's been nothing testified to about, that is, there's nothing in the evidence with regard to ranges of punishment, there were some statements made outside the testimony that were grossly incorrect. So you can't rely on statements made that are not in evidence. You should disregard those. We got the
Where's the other dog? He took a shot and killed one of them, Pat. Where that son of a bitch is down here? Where's my other dogs? Where's my other dogs? Where's your gun at? Drop your gun. Drop your gun. Turn around. Turn around. On the ground, sir. On the ground. On the ground. You're under arrest. On the ground. I'll shoot you with your gun. On the ground. You two on the ground. Now you will be shot. 5, 4, 3, 2. Put your gun on the ground. Put the gun down. Don't come out. Turn around. Put the gun down. You're under arrest. That's fine. I'm talking to you. Put the gun over there. No. You're under arrest. That's fine. It don't matter. I have a right.
Don't
Turn around.
put that gun on me.
Turn around.
Put
Turn
the
around.
gun down.
If you grab that gun, I'm gonna shoot. Get away from the truck. Get away from the truck. Get over there.
Put the gun down, damn it.
Put your can
Gun
down.
down.
Turn around.
Put the gun down.
Where's the other dogs at?
Hey, I don't know, dude.
Where's the other dogs at?
You're committing
Face down.
felony
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. The citizen's arrest. You're under
That's
arrest.
fine. Put the gun down.
You're under. Lay down. Lay down.
Put the gun down.
Lay down. Lay down.
Put the gun down.
Lay
Right
down.
now.
Man. Lay down.
Put the gun down.
Lay down. Where's the other dog? I want the other dog.
Dog ran that way.
Did he shoot her?
I didn't shoot shit. I'm working.
Did he shoot her?
I'm working right now.
Answer the
I don't know.
question.
He was a grown man. Put the
You're
gun
involved in it
down.
too. You're a witness.
Put the gun down.
No, you're both under arrest.
I don't give a shit. Yes, ma'am. I need a.
You're both under arrest.
I'm on a huge road. I'm being held at.
Tell Mike Parsons has a citizen's arrest on these two. They're different. They broke the law.
Put the gun down.
No,
My
you.
name is Dick King. And I'm in Tipton County, right on the edge of Shirley County.
Stay back. Where's the gun at? Where's your gun at? I found the holster. Where's your gun? Where's your gun at? Where's your gun at? Where's your gun at? Back up. Where's your gun at? Where's your gun at?
Don't touch that.
Where's your gun at?
Put the gun down and we'll talk.
Where's your gun at?
Put the gun down.
No, where's your gun at?
Put the gun down.
I'm not going to until you tell me where your gun is. Pull it out. Pull it out. Put it on the ground. What?
Put the gun down.
If you pull it out, what?
Put the gun down.
If you pull it out, what?
I'm not pulling my gun out.
If you pull it out, what'd you say? You're gonna shoot me?
No, put the gun
What did you
down.
say?
Put the gun down.
What did you say?
Put the gun down.
What did you say?
I don't care.
What did you say?
Put the gun down.
No. You're under arrest, dude. You don't understand. You have to stop. You understand you're under arrest?
You ain't got no.
You're under arrest. I do as a citizen. They done shot one of them. She's dead out here in the field. Who are you? What's your name?
You get the law down here and
What's your name? Back up.
You don't worry about it.
Yeah, I'm gonna worry about it. You're gonna worry about it. Yeah, you are.
Another case this son of a bitch is put up.
It's a female. What's her name? Gray. Brandy. Yeah, he killed Brandy. Yeah, come on down here in the field to get her. Bye. Where's your gun at? Don't come around this corner. Go to hell, son of a bitch. Follow me, you son of a bitch. You're going to jail. Follow me, son of a bitch. You're going to jail. You shot and killed my pet.
Okay, you now retire back to the stand recess.
All rise.
Doesn't get any better the more you hear it, does it?
Do I have some kind of concession on your part? What?
Yes, ma'am.
No. TJ is the only thing that ever killed me.
I agree now. Jim said it was on there too. I'm not listening to Tony on yours.
That's not you. Just stay out of it.
Ask Jerry to come in for a minute, please. Bring the book with them, please. Book. please. Thank you. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, I understand you've reached a verdict with regard to some charges, and it indicated that you're deadlocked on other charges. So, Ms. Rolson, I will pass back the forms that appear to that you've reached a verdict.
Yeah.
I'll hand these back, please. You'll read the verdict with regard to the charges that you have made a unanimous decision, please.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of aggravated assault of Nick King.
With regard to the next charge.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of aggravated assault of Barry Laxton.
And with regard to the next charge.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of burglary of a vehicle.
And with regard to the next charge.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of theft of property of Nick King.
With regard to the next charge.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of theft of property of Barry Laxton.
I'll hand those forms back. So say you all, is that everyone's verdict? That's a unanimous verdict from everyone. I want to ask you about the other two charges where you're noted indicated that you're deadlocked. There's a procedure that I'm required to go through to see where we are. I'm going to start with the charge by the state of aggravated kidnapping of Nick King. With regard to that count only, were you able to reach a verdict with regard to aggravated kidnapping that all 12 agreed to?
Yes, sir, we did not find him guilty of aggravated kidnapping.
All right. With regard, that's all 12 of you, is that correct? All right. With regard to the charge of kidnapping, a lesser included offense of Nick King, was there a unanimous verdict where all 12 agreed to that?
It was, not guilty on that one, too.
All right. Is that everyone's verdict?
Yes.
Not guilty on that?
Not guilty.
And with regard to false imprisonment of Nick King, was there a unanimous verdict with regard to that, or was that a split verdict?
That one was the not guilty as well on false imprisonment.
Does everyone say that? Is that everyone's verdict? With regard to attempt to commit an offense?
That's where we split.
All right, so that's the split
Yes.
on the attempt, okay, of one of those three offenses. Is that correct?
The split and the not guilty at all as far of any of the kidnapping charges.
That's right. So some, without telling me who did what, there's some that say with regard to the attempt guilty, and some say not guilty. All right. With regard to the aggravated kidnapping of Barry Laxton, was there a unanimous verdict with regard to aggravated kidnapping of Barry Laxton?
Not guilty.
All right. So say you all, that's everyone. And with regard to the kidnapping of Barry Laxton?
Not guilty.
So say you all, that's everyone. And with regard to the guilty of false imprisonment of Barry Laxton?
Not guilty.
Sir?
False imprisonment.
False imprisonment.
But that was guilty? Was there a split there?
There was a split.
A split there. Okay, so false imprisonment, and then I guess there's a split, or is there a split on attempt?
Yes.
Also a split on that.
Yes.
Okay. So with regard to Barry Laxton, there was a split at false imprisonment. And let me ask again, with regard to Nick King, was there a split on false imprisonment, or did everyone say not guilty on that?
Not guilty on false imprisonment.
Everyone said not guilty with regard to him. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. This has been a long trial and much different than normal trial, or most trials, not normal, but just most trials. And I greatly appreciate your patience. I greatly appreciate the attentiveness that you have shown and your willingness to work together through the trial. The bailiff will have a certificate showing where you've been if you need that. If you would, please call
Somebody
me
told
on
me that
Monday
I went to
night
jail immediately.
to see about the remaining schedule. You've been a wonderful jury to work with, and we greatly appreciate your diligence. Thank you very much, and you're excused at this time. Thank you.
because you make it. Who's got those rules?
I thought he was with the jailers.
The jury having found the defendant guilty of aggravated assault in 2 counts, burglary of a vehicle, and theft in 2 counts, the court finds the defendant guilty.
Your Honor, the state would ask that the bond be revoked in this matter.
The jury having found the defendant not guilty of aggravated kidnapping and kidnapping, the court finds the defendant not guilty. The court declares a mistrial with regard to false imprisonment and attempt to commit the offenses against Barry Laxton. With regard to the allegations of aggravated kidnapping of Nick King, the court finds the defendant not guilty of kidnapping, not guilty of false imprisonment, and declares a mistrial with regard to attempt to commit one of those offenses with regard to Mr. King. Sentencing to be set for January the 8th, unless the reports can be done earlier, and bond will be revoked. The defendant will be taken into custody.
I told you.
It's not a big
Take that.
Ms.
Give the recorder to
Mills
Pat.
Oh, yes,
is
sir.
relieved from further representation, and the private investigator is relieved from the prosecution. Stand in recess.
That was a C felony. It's a C felony.
What's that?
It was a C felony, 3 to 6 years at 30%. And
This is horrible.
Yeah.
Okay, what's involved?
I'm still shocked because it's a C felony, which relieved me to no end that they didn't find him guilty of kidnapping. B felony, which is 8 years at 100%. What's probably going to happen is he's going to hold him till January the 12th and then let him out, I hope. He was charged with a B felony, which carried 100%, 85, at least 85% or 100%. And Jill was found guilty of C felony, which is 36 years at 100%. Jill was found guilty they'll take you in. And C felony, they usually hold you. And so you said, on a C felony, they usually go back for sentencing. And then I heard the DA say, revoke his bond, and I said, it's a C felony, Mike. I said, Deputy, they're going to take me. And they did. And I guess it's because it was a burglary. I don't know where they got that. I'm going, I was so grateful for the C felony because I said, they won't take me in on a C felony. He said the judge has to come back and report. But what hopefully he'll do, I don't know, this is so crazy. So when he comes back January the 12th, then hopefully they'll say, I'm suspended for fine sorry. Then I'm paid for probation. I sure understand where it's January the 12th. Yeah. What's his, no, they revoked his bond. He is until he's sentenced on the 12th. He said unless, or the 8th. Is it okay to use that word? No. Unless you say they acted like. Y'all, I mean, I'm surprised about the burglary thing. What's his? Now he said unless the people were honest. Yeah.
What's the proper way to get this before somebody that can say, hey, time out, this is bullshit?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, that's the proper guy, and he revoked his bond. I don't know whether he did.
Well, we need to go to a higher authority because he's obviously got something. He's obviously got
Well, y'all, let me just say this, though. It could have been a B felony. I know nobody's...
Yeah, it could have been
And I'm
B.
thinking 100% at 8 years, at least 85% at 8 years day for day. That was my biggest fear, and I don't know if it was ever Mike's, but it was mine. I know it was Clark's, too.
No, I think had the jury verdict, I'm somewhat pleased. I mean, that they did drop the kidnapping. I mean, the serious stuff, the bogus stuff, the real serious stuff. But what he just did now, revoking bond,
Yeah, I was surprised.
Revoke his bond based on burglary and theft, which is a C-rated
Now
felony.
C, I ever saw it was a C. Burglary of vehicles a D. And then the theft over 500.
It's under 500.
I mean, is it Class A misdemeanor?
It's a Class B misdemeanor.
I don't know. I don't
Isn't it?
know. It's Class A misdemeanor, theft under 500. But I'm just sitting there thinking, it's normally what it, on a C felony, he'll let you go and then come back on your. But y'all, what he could do is say, okay, you're in there, and when you come back, I'll give you all time suspended for time served.
I don't believe it.
You don't think so, Clark? I'm still just kind of. That was 2 counts of a C, 2 counts
We need to
of
move over to the side, those other guys.
Yeah, but as far as going anywhere, you can go anywhere, and you're not going to do the paper to go anywhere you want. Because you're talking about 60 to 90 days, 60 days. I mean, and y'all on a C felony, the judge could have given him 90 days. Came back and said, okay, I'll give you 90 days. This way he's in there.
Yeah, but he's in there through the...
I know.
What am I going to do?
You want that in front of
Well, what's the next legal step that could be taken?
Just on the 8th, come back. They'll do a sentencing report. They'll see he has no prior record, and that's a mitigating factor. And then he needs to ask the judge for judicial diversion. That means, Judge, I've got a TBI report that indicates he has no prior record. I will mail that to him. He should have a copy. It was given to him by my secretary. And when he goes to court that day, say, you know, based on the fact I have no prior record, can I be released at this point and go back to work? I've got a family. You know, I've stayed through the jail on the holidays, and I've got this felony, and try to get this felony expunged after a time period. And then get Dr. Ziaco to come back on that date to testify that, you know, he was under strain. And you remember the guy that was here, John?
Yeah.
And he needs to come back. And I told him, I said, if we have to go to sentencing, that's when you need to come back. So he testified that everything he did was just out of nerves and, yeah.